Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We are now into our final afternoon session for the first day of our event. Thanks for being here. And let me begin then by introducing the first of our two speakers to close out this portion of the event. Our first speaker for this session is Professor M.R.X. Dentith, author of The Philosophy of Conspiracy Theories with Springer, very well cited, well-known, well-respected book. Topic of this talk, very much in the same vein, titled The Other Kind of Deception on the Genealogy of Conspiracy Theories. Over to you.
Okay, just make sure that Thank you, very kind. I'll be paying those bribes after today's session. Okay, so the usual disclaimer, I wrote a long paper. I can't present a long paper within the scope of 20 minutes, so I'm going to be doing just a section of the paper here. Also, unfortunately for me, one of the people that both of the people I'm going to be talking about in this presentation, I saw a presentation on their work yesterday, so I'm now in the midst of mentally reformulating my own views in light of what I experienced yesterday, which means I may be editing my own words as I speak, which may make for a very interesting experience. Okay, the other thing I'll note is I'm actually mostly talking about other people's views here as opposed to my own. So I'm presenting some stuff about how deception plays a role in belief in conspiracy theories. I'll be talking about people's views and then trying to make sense of that in the scope of the kind of discussions we've been having here today, one of which is actually fairly close to discussions in the last session. Okay, the prelims. Let's accept that some people are gullible and they believe conspiracy theories for no good reason. Let's also accept that not all conspiracy theories turn out to be examples of gullible beliefs, because we know that conspiracies do occur, and we do know that historically, some people, when trying to cover up their conspiracies, have labeled views about their conspiracies as conspiracy theories as being, in some sense, mad, bad, or dangerous. Now, this paper, and actually most of the work I do, is in a particular debate going on in the philosophical branch of conspiracy theory, which is the academic study of conspiracy theory, which is made up not just of philosophy, but sociology, culture studies, religious studies, social sciences, etc., etc. Within that particular philosophical branch of the debate, there's a debate between two rival theses. One thesis is the thesis of generalism, which is the idea that we actually have a kind of prima facie suspicion of conspiracy theories, which is justified in some sense. So when you hear about a conspiracy theory, that is a good reason to think it's a bad theory. Particularists disagree, and they say that actually you can only judge whether a conspiracy theory is good or bad by evaluating the conspiracy theory on its relevant merits, which is probably going to be evidential. And thus, if you hear something is called a conspiracy theory, you should be agnostic about it and then go and work out whether it's a good conspiracy theory or a bad conspiracy theory. And as my parents' generation would say, who has time for this particular crap? Because, investigating conspiracy theories is difficult. And the answer is philosophers have time for this kind of philosophical crap. Now, the way we'll be talking about conspiracy theories in this particular presentation follows the work of Matthew Shields. So Matthew Shields, in a paper back in 2022, brings up the idea of what he calls dominant institutional theories, although they should really be dominant institutional conspiracy theories. The idea being, most of the time when people who are engaged in studying conspiracy theories talk about example conspiracy theories, they talk about theories which are usually minority views believed by marginalized people that actually have, in many respects, no serious impact upon the world in which we live. Now, we have a Trump presidency coming up, so you might be worried that some of these so-called marginal views have outsized effects. There's a big debate going on in literature about the way that these effects work. We're just going to leave that to one side. Shields' argument is, if we are concerned about the adverse consequences of belief in conspiracy theories, we should be focusing our attention on the conspiracy theories which are promoted by people in positions of power. So we should be looking at dominant institutions that have on occasion, and it's an empirical question as to how often that is, decided to use a conspiracy theory to cover up something that they've done. So we should be focusing our attention on the dominant institutions and the kind of conspiracy theories they put forward. Okay, so that's the prelims for this particular talk. Now we're going to talk about people who are deceived. So we're looking here at the work of Nader Shawabi, who has a particular interest in what he calls a genealogical problem with certain conspiracy theories. These are cases where people promote theories that they do not seem to believe, which leads to a case of what he thinks is a peculiar problem of epistemic undermining. That is, if someone promotes a conspiracy theory that they themselves do not believe, it seems irrational for people to believe those theories. If a lying liar lies, you shouldn't trust what the lying liar says. It would be strange to do so. But he has in mind here cases where there are lying liars who lie, who put forward conspiracy theories that we have very good reason to think are not believed by their promoters. And it turns out that people end up believing those theories nonetheless. And he is concerned that some of the belief in these conspiracy theories is epistemically safe because there's a genealogical story which explains why people have a particular worldview, which means that they end up trusting the speaker for reasons other than what they assert or what their utterances are, leading to them forming beliefs about conspiracy theories on the basis of lies, but believe safely because of the kind of society they live in or the worldview that they have grown up in. So even though the conspiracy theories are false, it still seems that they can be reliably believed because of a person's worldview, i.e. the genealogy that brings them to a particular place in society licenses their believing the conspiracy theory, even if the conspiracy theory is a kind of deception. And so he's interested, like Qassam Qassam, whose name I've never been able to pronounce correctly because I tried to say Qassam Qassam. He's interested in the political function of these so-called safe conspiracy theories, saying, look, if we understand the genealogy of belief here, we understand how people in exploited or marginalized positions will end up coming to belief in certain conspiracy theories, which are false, but are safely believed because of the worldview of the people who are experiencing these lying lies by the liars who tell lies. And so he gets really interested in COVID-19 conspiracy theories. He gets particularly interested in the notion of the Great Replacement thesis and the idea there are people who end up living in white supremacist worldviews, who end up endorsing neo-Nazi or Nazi-esque views. And he goes, look, these people aren't being irrational. Yes, they're being lied to, but the world in which they live makes these views things which they think are true for reasons other than the lie, more so the world in which they live. And so he takes from this that we should have a kind of radical humility when it comes to dealing with conspiracy theorists of this particular type. So we should be very interested in looking at what these people believe and traveling to their worlds, in his words, to experience the kind of worldviews they have in order to understand why they believe the things that they do. And this seems, on the face of it, to be a fairly, I don't say innocuous, it's not the right word. There's nothing particularly objectionable about this view. But there is a particular problem that Shobi doesn't really grapple with in his discussion about us needing to world travel to understand why people have the conspiracy theories that they do. which is that if we're concerned about the genealogy of belief in conspiracy theories, we should also be concerned about the genealogy of belief of conspiracy theory itself. People who study conspiracy theories and talk about conspiracy theories have a genealogy or worldview about those conspiracy theories. And this you might think is a really minor point, but one of the things that Shobi talks about, yes, is talking about particular conspiracy theories, which he says we can see this most explicitly in conspiracy theories such as Pizzagate, where there is a clear anti-Semitic element. Now, this is interesting because depending on which kind of conspiracy theorist you talk to, Pizzagate conspiracy theories have clearly anti-Semitic elements due to claims about blood rituals, child sacrifice, and the like. But in the context of the United States of America, there is another genealogy for these particular conspiracy theories you need to take into account, which were the anti-Catholic conspiracy theories of the 19th and 20th and 21st century, where the same kind of claims are being made, but they're being made about adherents of the Roman Catholic Church and their allegiance to the Bishop of Rome, the Pope. And so if we're going to world travel, we need to make sure we are traveling to the right kind of world to be able to understand exactly what is going on with these particular conspiracy theories. There's another side issue here, which I won't have time to go into, but there's also something a little bit disturbing about asking people to travel to neo-Nazi style worlds to try to understand what people believe with respect to those hypotheses, because you are asking people to entertain dangerous ideas which we know have had an effect upon the way that people think. So if we are going to engage in world traveling, we need to identify the worlds adequately. We need to be looking at the genealogy of our beliefs that generate those worldviews. And it isn't simply sufficient to say we should travel to those worlds to understand those views. We may need to have some kind of strictures about what it means to travel to those worlds. Now, there's another attempt in the literature to deal with the genealogy of conspiracy theories and the way that deception plays a role in these beliefs. And this is the work of Alexios Brea, who's come up with a different theory about the genealogy of some conspiracy theories. His genealogy is the idea that there are certain conspiracy theories that we know are generated by or are the product of actual conspirators. So we know that certain conspiracy theories are not naturally arising reactions to suspicion of a conspiracy. Rather, they are the product of people going, done something bad, need to cover it up. Here's a conspiracy theory we can tell people about the event to make it look as if we didn't do a bad thing whatsoever. And Alexios says, look, once you know that a conspiracy theory is itself the product of a conspiracy, that is an epistemically undermining fact about that conspiracy theory that not only tells you the conspiracy theory is false, but if you can identify that these conspirators are responsible for other theories as well, those other theories are undermined by the existence of what he calls the second order conspiracy. So he uses lots of interesting examples. So in his two papers, he talks about anti-vaccination campaigns. He talks about climate change denial lobbyists doing their work. I think we can add to that a fair number of examples which have been propounded by particular governmental forces. The Nixon White House disseminating conspiratorial claims about Watergate is a nice example there, especially since some of the people involved in covering up Watergate are involved in the Trump administration and have been involved in the Bush administration and have been involved in a lot of other nefarious deeds. We have, of course, the invasion of Iraq in 2003, where we were told there were weapons of mass destruction, which turned out not to exist. We have some other more interesting examples. The CIA putting out claims of conspiracy when they were going about trying to stop any information about enhanced interrogation, aka torture, coming out. There is still an ongoing issue in the US where the FBI is doing something very suspicious about covering up the numerous faults of forensic science by basically telling people that people who criticize forensic science are either working for the criminals or don't have the right kind of academic background. There are lots of examples here of people in dominant positions putting forward conspiracies, putting forward conspiracy theories to cover up what looks to be conspiratorial activity. And Alexios goes, look, these people have a common way of doing things. They know how to repackage their messages to certain parts of the population. They tend to create astroturf groups to make it look as if these are grassroots organizations, as opposed to Roger Stone in an office in New York. They go to great efforts to either fund a parallel academic track or give the impression that their experts are real experts and not fake experts. And some of them are involved in numerous examples of creations of conspiracy theories. We find that the people involved in hiding the fact that smoking causes lung cancer are now the people involved in hiding the fact, not particularly well, that the climate is changing due to human-induced activity. So he says, look, if a conspiracy theory is the result of such a conspiracy, that epistemically undermines it. And this actually might be an easier way to evaluate certain conspiracy theories than the standard particulars line of investigating things according to the evidence. Looking at the evidential claims for complex conspiracy theories is remarkably difficult. Being able to show that a conspiracy theory is the product of a known set of conspirators is relatively easy, and thus you can take one single conspiracy and say, look, if these people produce X, Y, and Z conspiracy theories, that epistemically undermines all three without needing to look at the propositional content. But I think you need to be cautious about going so far with this. Alexios wants to say, look, once you know about the existence of the conspiracy, that tells you that all conspiracy theories by those conspirators are bad. But it might not be. So for example, what about the child who cried wolf or the climate change denier who denied climate change? So Alexios, in his paper from this year, mentions the work of Fred Singer. Fred Singer was a major figure in the denying of anthropogenic climate change in the United States. I think he died in about 2007. He was a climate scientist. He was very active in denying the idea that humans are involved in the induction of global heating as we know it. He was knowingly paid by big oil to do his research work. He was involved in the April 1998 meeting at the American Petroleum Institute, whose minutes we have, where they quite deliberately said, we are going to set up the impression that there is an honest debate in academia to ensure that people start doubting the truth of global heating. So on one hand, he really does look like he was a disingenuous person helping to design a conspiracy theory. But on the other hand, Fred Singer may have been a true believer. He was a climate scientist by training. He, for a period of time, didn't publish, but he did write on the topic using evidence and arguments. His arguments and evidence may not have been good, but that doesn't mean he was being insincere. It may turn out that the so-called conspiracy to deny climate change might be people who really do believe humans cannot induce climate change, and they simply look like they're conspiring because they are literally conspiring against an orthodoxy they think is illegitimate. And of course, the other thing is that sometimes conspiracy theories might not be a genealogical creation of conspirators, but a theory which is co-opted by conspirators. Alexios talks about the protocols of the Elders of Zion, a document we know was fabricated to justify Jewish pogroms in Tsarist Russia. But the issue is, when the protocols were created, they weren't created to create Jewish pogroms in Russia. They were created to supply the missing evidence the Tsarist secret police thought they needed to persuade the Tsar of a theory that was commonly believed at the time. The conspirators co-opted an existing theory here. They didn't create the theory to then disseminate it. And if we've got co-option going on here as part of the genealogy, and thus we lose the actual genealogical source of the theory, the epistemic undermining of knowing a genealogy is not going to be as useful as maybe Alexios wants to make it seem. And of course, there are going to be situations where conspirators who are lying liars who lie turn out to actually discover the existence of a very real conspiracy against them, and they start talking about it in the way they've talked about it in the past. You can imagine a situation where climate scientists decide that actually maybe governments aren't listening to them, so they decide they are going to start faking data to make the problem look even worse than it is, in the hope that this time maybe governments will listen to them and we'll start getting ourselves on track to less than 2 degrees warming in the next decade. The people promoting the climate change is false conspiracy theory find out about this. They then start telling people, look, there really is now a conspiracy by climate scientists to fake climate data. They would be putting out a conspiracy theory here. And we can't just trust the source of the conspiracy to necessarily say that the conspiracy theory itself is false. Okay, I'm aware that I am right on time here. So I think there is a problem here in that Alexios wants to say that we can simply work out a genealogy and show that conspiracy theories are false because of that genealogy. I think it's a very nice part of the toolkit for working out why some conspiracy theories look false, but I don't think it's an epistemically undermining aspect here. It may be a pragmatically useful tool, given that we don't have much time for this crap, unless you're one of those philosophers, but at the same time, it doesn't give us quite the sui generis approach to dealing with things the way that Alexios wants them to. So yes, deceptive conspirators and deceptive individuals do cause some belief in conspiracy theories, but we need to be very careful about talking about the role of deception as a causal factor in those conspiracy theories, lest we end up trying to do too much with what effectively ends up being too little. And I'll bring that to a close by leaving you with a list of references.
And first, so we have a third microphone.
Yep, we've got microphones everywhere. Grab pen and paper so I can take notes of what Keith is going to say.
Thanks, yeah, very interesting talk. I just want to suggest that there's like a deeper problem even with the lectures you do. Like you said, it strikes me as like problematically circular. Like, so in order to know that something has been, created by such and such group of people, they created this conspiracy theory. Seems like you have to know the theory is false already, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's the stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely. He makes the claim that it's going to be easier to investigate a epistemic genealogy than it would be to investigate the claim of the conspiracy theory itself. But the only way you'd end up questioning the genealogy would be working out the theory is false and then go, why are they saying this obviously false thing? So no, I agree. I think it actually technically makes things more difficult, but once you've got that genealogy, you can do interesting things with it. But getting there is going to be hard.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I saw a hand from Simon.
Thanks so much. Super interesting stuff. I thought one thing that might be helpful is there are some cases that kind of have analogous structure to this in the literature on higher order evidence. So I just wanted to bring one up for you and maybe think about its consequences. So there's this famous hypoxia case where there's a pilot flying a plane and they're doing calculations to figure out whether they don't have enough fuel to get back, whatever. And then they learn that that there's a good chance, or that they do have hypoxia, which is oxygen, the lack of oxygen that messes up your calculations. And then there's a question of how confident should they be that they don't have enough fuel and need to land. So they've got their first order evidence, which was the calculation they did, but then they also have evidence that their first order evidence is unreliable. And it's very controversial. It's very, very, very difficult to give the correct theory of how to handle higher order evidence. So like the first naive thought is, well, given that you have hypoxia, just ignore your first order evidence and just be, maybe it's like just treat it as complete chance whether you have enough fuel because your evidence is worthless. Those kinds of theories tend to be, I think, not quite right. But then there's a view where you just completely ignore your higher order evidence, which would be like the analog of just ignoring the conspiracy to create the conspiracy theory. I think those theories also have a lot of trouble. So then there's some kind of Bayesian middle ground where you incorporate the evidence to some extent, but it's unclear how much. But anyways, I think that might be a fruitful place to look.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point. Because there's also the question, if you think you've got hypoxia, leading you to question your judgment, you might also be questioning your judgments about whether you've got hypoxia in the first place.
Yeah.
So it does end up becoming this very circular case of, well, if I doubt this, I have to doubt that. But if I doubt that, I have to doubt this. So,
And one way to make it also forceful, I think a nice thing about the hypoxia case is you can imagine that they did a pen and paper calculation that is as strong of evidence as any evidence you'd usually have for anything. Usually when we talk about conspiracy theories, usually the evidence in favor of the conspiracy theory is pretty sketchy. But imagine a case where the evidence, for example, imagine there was super climate denial that gave really powerful looking evidence that was like, it actually looked like much better evidence than the regular climate scientists. They were just like super, it was like Albert Einstein rose from the grave. And he was like, oh, actually, I did a million calculations. One of the best scientists came back from the grave and did the calculations. But then imagine you found out that they were in the conspiracy. So that would be a case where your first order evidence now was super strong, but will we think that the conspiracy theory undermines it? I think that kind of makes it a bit forceful.
Yeah, I mean, there is a big literature in the philosophy of conspiracy theories about what to do about the fact that conspirators are presumably in most cases actively covering up what they're doing. Now, as Charles Pigden and myself have argued, that's true of some conspiracy theories, but some conspiracies actually don't require active cover-ups after an event. If you kill Caesar by reference to a conspiracy, once Caesar is dead, you take responsibility because you want to end up going, who killed Caesar? It was me. We killed Caesar. So yeah, it's an interesting situation for a certain subclass of conspiracy theory.
Do we have anybody else? I think perhaps one more question could be entertained.
So I was kind of curious about what you would think about the opposite claim. So suppose I find evidence that a certain conspiracy theory has been put together by some conspirator. Then it would seem that these people have access to information about the internal workings of, they sit where the decisions really are made or whatever. So there might be some way in which they may unintentionally let some information through, so to say. So the idea basically here is, can there be some case in which having knowledge of the fact that a certain conspiracy theory is produced by people who are into the big conspiracies made by, I don't know, whoever runs the world, might be regarded as maybe a reason to look between the lines and see if you can use, the way in which they build the theory, the kind of decisions that went into developing it, the details that are included in a conspiracy as, I don't know, a starting point for inquiry for someone, who is interested in what is being covered up.
Yeah, so actually Alexios does make a very similar point in his 2024 paper, which is that inquiring into the genealogy of conspiracy theories is a form of conspiracy theorizing. You are going, well, look, I think this conspiracy theory here is suspect. But that then suggests the existence of a conspiracy I'm going to be investigating. If I'm investigating a conspiracy, I'm engaging in conspiracy theorizing here. I'm saying that these conspirators are the subject themselves of a conspiracy theory that's going to be investigated. So yeah, there is something to this particular claim that it's going to, the working out that there are people conspiring is going to lead you down the path of going, you should probably investigate these conspiracy theories more seriously. Now, of course, I think that's a bullet we should bite because I think that people in power probably conspire a lot more than we are comfortable with. And so we should be checking out these claims. But yes, it does lead to a natural, you are going to become a conspiracy theorist by alleging the existence of a conspiracy here.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to a close here. And then we're going to move on in just a moment to our final.
I will take my phone back. Thank you. All right, your turn.
Is this some sort of formatting issue, perhaps?
Be like that. No, the rest
Your
of it.
text is at least making it in, so just the title slides a bit. And this is the first word, right? Of misinformation and what not to do.
The threats of misinformation.
Threats, okay, yeah, something's gone awry with this page. Threats of misinformation.